Horizons, a series of programs where we will explore the things that matter to us as individuals, those things that feed our minds and souls with the many parts that make up who we are. My name is Esther Frank, and I look forward to spending this time with you, making connections to those shared thoughts and ideas we all have as a people. Do you ever think about what life will be like in the year 2000 and beyond? It sounds like a time in the far distant future, but it's really only 11 years away. There are signs out there right now giving us clues about what our world will be like, and there are people whose job it is to read those signs. I talked with Ed Barlow, a futurist and management consultant, and asked him about this process called futuring.
Well, from the research I've done in the evolution of the term, you know, for a number of years, we really didn't have to look at the future because life remained pretty much the same. We could expect tomorrow to be like yesterday. Then we began to see a lot of evolutionary steps take place in technology and in people and whatever, and we began to recognize the importance of kind of looking ahead. So we developed the concept of planning, which is kind of laying out a direction that one would take to get from point A to point B. Then we added the concept of long-range planning, where we needed to do more planning than just for next week. Now we have a concept in the environment called strategic planning, which means planning has to be done with a sense of the environment, a sense of the world around you, not just planning what you want. You have to relate it to the world around you. And it seems like now, because of the increasing pace of change, and also by virtue of the capacities that we as human beings now have, the capacities to create a future, to go beyond our past experience, we seem to have developed a new concept or a new approach towards organizing that world of tomorrow called futuring. And the essence of futuring is to take a look at alternatives for a community, a company, one's own life, and to begin to plan accordingly. The real benefit to futuring, as I see the concept and I see the process, is to provide people the opportunity to get together and develop what we call a shared strategic vision about the future. And that is to develop a common future, to develop a way that all of us can move together into the future. Not that it has to be exactly the same for each of us, but we take some time to identify what we have in common, what we have in agreement, and begin to organize things accordingly.
Crystal balls are not the method of choice for futurists. They base their projections on trends, technology, current lifestyles, and those things, as you said, that tie us together with each other into the world.
Yes, I would agree with that. And it also involves people using more than just the linear approaches to planning. Historically, we based our planning on a lot of numbers. We'd crunch a lot of data. We'd take a lot of statistics from our past and try to do trend line projections. That's part of it. But we also have the ability to go beyond those trend lines or to alter those trend lines. If we don't like the direction that something is taking, we've got the power and the capacity in many cases to create a different future than those trend lines might, lead to. And so, futuring allows individuals in a community to take their whole being, their whole person, the left brain and the right brain, so to speak, the linear information and the intuitive feeling about things, and pull that together into a nice vision of where they'd like to be.
So there's a way to stop and evaluate where we are right now, and this concept is kind of new.
You bet.
Thinking about it, that there are choices we can make, things that we can perhaps take from the past.
Correct.
Does the past, in fact, have any bearing on where we're going?
Absolutely. I think we all need to be aware from whence we came, our roots, so to speak, and because that does give us information about ourselves. It does give us information about patterns we may want to maintain. At the same time, we have to recognize that those patterns were developed in a period of time when there were certain environmental conditions or certain environmental circumstances around us, and they were good for that time. And in light of new environmental circumstances or a changing environment, we may need to rethink those patterns and develop new patterns that will be more appropriate for a different time.
What are things that you see happening today that you feel are going to become part of our future tomorrow?
Sure. I think there are three elements that we need to understand, three dynamics, so to speak, that are taking place. Let me begin with the economic shift that's going on. We are very much into a global economy. And that global economy means that we in this country are going to have to learn to do business with people around the world in their way of doing business. Historically, we pretty much did business with ourselves. If we did do business around the world, we were so powerful and had so much clout, everybody had to do it our way. But now we're finding other countries like the Japanese, even Europe, are developing a much stronger economic hold on the world economy. An example of that is in 1974, the United States held 31% of the capital market investments in the world. Now we find that, back in 1974 we owned 63% of the world capital markets, and now in 1987 we find we only own 31%. And so that's an example where we do not have the economic clout that we used to have. In addition, there's a shift going on in our economy in this country, and that is we used to rely a lot on manufacturing, a lot on agriculture to make this economy go. Now we're finding it's an information and service economy, and it's being driven by different forces. A lot of the manufacturing activity that we used to do now can be done less expensively around the world by other countries. An example of that is the average manufacturing worker in this country has a compensation package of about $13.50. You look at Japan, it's about $9.50. You go to Korea, it's $1.76. And it goes down from there. So where people power is needed to produce parts and manufacturing commodities, etc., you're going to see that move out of this country in a global economy. And so Marvin Citron, for example, has identified that in the year 2000, 91% of the jobs in this country will be related to information and service, the rest to manufacturing, agriculture, mining, etc. And that means that all of us have to take on the skills that will be related to these new jobs. And basically it means being able to work cooperatively with people, and it also means we have to be able to access information and process information much more expeditiously than we did in the past.
Ed, what you're saying is really not hot news off the press. We've been hearing and reading a lot recently about the global economy and a service-oriented economy and for some time now. So we're aware of the changes we're going to have to make to fit in a productive way. So people already know that.
I think you just hit on the key, if I can interrupt you there for a minute. The information is there. Some people know it, some people don't. It's my belief that those that know it have a decided advantage on creating their future. Those that don't may be preparing themselves for a world that no longer exists. And I think the key is to do everything we can to get the information about what is really going on out there to as many people as possible, so they also can see the opportunities. And that's one of the things I do as a futurist is to take that information to people and say, things are going to be different. Life's going to be different. The economy's going to be different. Now you got the chance to respond to it. Now you have the chance to prepare for it. Other changes, too, that I was going to deal with, too, technology, for example. We've moved from computers that took a lot of space to computers now that you can keep in your pocket that have the same amount of power. The average car in the year 1993 will have the same onboard computer power that the Apollo spacecraft had. We're moving from things like adding machines to calculators, now to spreadsheets, and what we're also going to have in the future is artificial intelligence. Machines that will be equipped to make certain decisions within certain parameters on their own. You're going to see smart homes, smart cars, smart offices, all kinds of technology around us that will improve the quality of life and also improve our ability to be competitive If we can use the technology to our advantage, we can be more competitive in a global marketplace. So we're going to see the technology changing tremendously around us. Today it's almost like you buy a computer and the minute you buy it, it's obsolete. It's changing so quickly.
What other changes do you see happening?
The changing populations, a graying society. In the year 2000, there will be more people over the age of 50 than under the age of 50, which will be a real phenomena for this country. I was talking to a business today and helping them to understand that 70% of the people who will be working in the year 2000 are working today, which means, you know, you basically have your workforce. With the changing environment, education is going to be a real important element. We also see there's going to be more women in the workplace. They say in the year 2025 that 65% of the workforce will be made up of women. More and more minorities, Hispanics and Asians, blacks will be entering the workforce. Another statistic that's interesting in terms of the family makeup. In the year 2000, only 1/3 of the children 18 years of age and under will be part of what we have identified as the traditional family unit, original mother and father. 2/3 will be part of non-traditional family unit, which will include single parents or adults that have remarried. So you look at the economic, you look at the technical, and you look at the social changes that are taking place, and they're tremendous. And people will have to recognize that it will require new patterns of thinking and new ways of dealing with people in the future.
How do we do that? How do we do that, Ed? You know, all of this is just mind-boggling information. How do we just shift our gears and change direction?
First of all, I think we have to understand that the way we look at things, the patterns we have developed, were developed at a time when life pretty much remained the same. It didn't change very often. You could expect everything to remain basically the same for about 15 years. Now, with the doubling of information every 2.5 years, that environment's going to change and our patterns must change. Now, if we understand that what we are now has been good for us, very valuable, and we should celebrate the fact that we had that experience. So you accept where we've been, and then we have to say, okay, in light of these environmental circumstances, I'm going to have to take on new patterns. And that changing is okay. We have placed a value on remaining the same. Now we have to place as much value and celebration on changing.
Not easy.
Not easy at all.
Folks don't like changing.
And Tom Peters, in his new book, Thriving on Chaos, basically communicates the fact that we all now must come to love change and be excited about it. So I think we need to understand our past. I think we need to understand what the future may be like. I think we need to recognize that it's okay to change. I think we need to keep a positive mental attitude about what is out there. And I think each of us has to take on a zealousness about learning, a zealousness about being open to information that is there, which signals the need to change. And to go after this information with great vigor, and to always be assessing, what does that mean for me? What must I now do, to adjust to this? I was reading an article the other day, and the time frame from somebody developing an idea to someone putting that in the form of an invention, to someone then innovating, providing some innovation to that invention, and then to where it becomes copied quite profusely, as happens in our global economy. That time frame is much shorter now, and we must recognize that and accept that and respond to that.
Ed, I just love your own zealousness as you speak about being open to new information and to the idea of change. But the world around us, as you say, is changing so quickly. And even though I try to stay on top of things, I can see where so many changes are happening so rapidly that it is difficult to keep up, to synthesize what's happening, and to make some sense of it. What do you look at that gives you the sense of where we're going?
First of all, let me give you a sense of history about me. I came up in a very traditional environment in southwestern Michigan, very traditional roots. You know, the Republican philosophy that I was the only philosophy, and we should convert everyone. The religion that I was brought up within was the only religion, we should convert everyone. And as I had the chance to travel, I began to see that not everybody came from the same place, and yet they were as valid and could justify why they were the way they were, why they believed, you know, what they believed. So I think, first off, I began to recognize that there were a lot of people out there who were well-intentioned that were coming from different places, and that was okay. Educationally and professionally, I was brought up through an educational system that placed a high value on finding the one right career for the rest of your life. And so for a number of years, my reading was in a very narrow range. It was just those things related to my profession. Well, I started out in education, and then I moved to business. And so most of what I read early on was just educational material. Then moved to another arena and just business material. And I began to see that there was a lot of value in reading in a much wider range of literature or research or whatever. And so I began to look to the fringes. I began to look in areas that I never thought about reading in before. And so I broadened, you know, my horizons by virtue of taking in information that historically I had rejected. And now what I do to keep up to date is I watch all the news stations on television. I read things like the USA Today and the Wall Street Journal and the Los Angeles Times, the New York Times, and Chicago Tribune. I read as many newspapers as I can get a hold of. I also subscribe to services that scan material and synthesize it for me. The World Future Society, for example, publishes a synthesis of the most up-to-date material on planning and futuring, etc. And I get that once a month, and I review that. There's a service out of Connecticut that will take the most recent books that have been written and reduce them to 6 to 8 page summaries, which I can get through in about 10 to 15 minutes. And there are several other things that I access that provide me a synopsis of the most up-to-date statistics, trends, demographic issues, etc. And you know, that allows me to get a sense of what is going on, and from that sense you begin to see that, well, yeah, the same things that are going on in business are going on in education. The same things that are going on in healthcare are going on in government.
It's like the more things change, the more they stay the same. In talking about unrelated areas, you mentioned that the same things are going on. Like what? People
trying to deal with change, rapid and dramatic change, technology. It's common. All these arenas that historically thought they were kind of separate and did their own thing are now finding that they have things in common. And so, you know, as a result of understanding some of these changes and all the reading I've done in a variety of areas, I find myself being invited by business and industry, healthcare, government, and education to talk to them about the future. And it's interesting. On many occasions, I've been able to take a creative idea that I found over here in business and share it with an educational group, or a creative idea that came out of a healthcare symposium and apply it to a government situation. And so plugging into scanning sources, placing a value on reading a wide variety of things, listening to people who are dealing with things in their own environment, have just helped me keep up, and also personally go through a learning curve that has just been unbelievable and exciting. It's made me a different person as a result of it.
It sounds very exciting. So when you get all of this information and you begin to see similarities between fields, Does something go off in your mind, a little red flag, little bells ringing saying, this looks like a trend? How do you know a trend when you see one?
You know, I think there are a number of levels of trends, or a number of areas of trends. For example, in my children, you know, if my son or my daughter is taking on a new pattern and I see it 3 or 4 times, sure, that's a trend. And that means they've headed in a different direction, or there's a fairly logical alternative or a high degree of expectation that they will continue to behave in that way. If it's desirable behavior, I'll reinforce it. If it's not, maybe I'll try to adjust it. When I work with around the country with organizations and people, what I take to them by virtue of trends are similarities of thinking, similarities of approach that I have seen in other places in the country. For example, if I go to Louisiana and I see people are beginning to deal with an issue, and then I go to California and that issue is on their mind also, and then I go to New York the next day and that issue is there. To me, that means there's kind of a trend. That issue becomes a trend for those people.
And how important are trends in the futuring process?
John Nesbitt, in his work, had a methodology he used for identifying trends, and this is simply to have a cadre of people reading newspapers from all over the country, and where a similar issue or similar information surfaced in a number of places, they considered that a trend. So I tend to use a similar approach as John Nesbitt, and that is to look at current information and to look at the way people are anticipating the future. And where I find commonality, a high degree of commonality, a lot of people saying the same thing, I tend to take that as a direction or a trend, so to speak, and suggest that people be alert that this may be something that they will experience, and start thinking about how you may want to approach it.
But that can't be easy for everybody. We mentioned that before. And your job as a motivator is to get people to be thinking about the future. Can we talk a little bit about what you do as a motivator?
Sure.
What are the common obstacles and roadblocks that prevent people from thinking creatively?
Sure. Fear of change, fear of the unknown, and what I try to bring to them is my own personal philosophy and my own personal experience, that fear is okay, that fear is real, but to accept that fear and then to let go of that fear and to look very positively at the opportunities that will exist in this changing environment. And so I try to affirm where they are. It's okay to be uneasy. There's nothing wrong with that. And to say, all right, now what are we going to do about it? Let's really creatively and positively look ahead and respond to it. Quite often when people are in a fearful mental state of mind, they find themselves not able to move any direction at all. And so I try to help them identify that next step. The other thing I do in working with people is to take to them my belief that everybody needs to become a futurist, and that everybody needs to take some time to kind of open their mind to some of the realities that are out there that are different from the realities that they've known, and to really step back for a minute and explore issues like people from other cultures have something valuable to offer us. Technology can be a value add to our way of life. Change can be exciting and fun. And so, you know, I take to them this philosophy that a futurist is something that everybody can be, and that it can be fun and exciting and a real opportunity. The other thing I bring to people is a lot of information about what is going on, and versus a specialist in the economy or a specialist in psychology that might be brought in, and they've got a particular narrow range of interest or focus, what I've done is looked to all fields, all disciplines, and pulled out the most up-to-date information and kind of pulled it all together to let people get a sense of how all of these things are going, in a holistic way, are going to impact their lives, and to help them get a sense of wholeness, a sense of what all these different dynamics are going to mean to them. And then certainly I bring with me some thoughts as to how I've approached the future, approaches that they then can try and see if they will work for them. But a lot of what I do is, after giving the information and my philosophy to people, is to just brainstorm with them and get them to begin to take personal responsibility for what it means for them and to set their own course as to how they want to approach it. And those courses are very different. And then I, affirm their taking responsibility and identifying a course of action. And so I give them a lot of room and a lot of space for them to see themselves. And
the best teachers are those that open doors for new thought, intellectual growth, and curiosity. And this is very much what you're doing in Futuring 101. The people you're talking to, though, Ed, have to be open and have to be able to accept new thoughts and new ideas and start moving in other directions. Tell me about that process.
A couple things that you mentioned. I remember doing a program in the Detroit area, and a 75-year-old woman came up to me after the program, and she said, "Ed," she said, "this has been a very exciting evening for me. I've decided that I'm going to take advantage of a computer literacy course that is offered at my local community college, and as a senior citizen I can take the course for nothing." And she said, two things are going to happen. Number one, I'm going to keep up to date. And she said, number two, I'll have a new language and a new way of communicating with my grandchildren. And so that was just a very exciting experience. And I've always wished that I could put a little mini camera on my shoulder and capture the facial expressions and reactions of people as they become aware of the information that I am sharing with them, and then later be able to feed it back to them and catch their reaction. Well, you get a variety of responses. Fear. I mean, you see fear, on people's faces. I've seen a couple people break out in a cold sweat, about what was going on. But also I've seen people kind of start jumping up and down and say, "This is neat. I can hardly wait to get at it. Where do I start?" And I've gotten this reaction from people of all ages. And so it's exciting to see people begin to deal with this information in their own special way, and then see them begin to lay out an action plan of sorts to begin to do something about it. After every session, I go around the room and I ask people who are present to identify for me what they're going to do about this. And of course, the range of responses has been anywhere from, like I mentioned before, I'm going to go back to school, to I'm going to go back to my office and I'm going to confront my boss because we really have to deal with this issue, to I'm going to retire early from my job. It's just too much. And so it is very exciting, and people have reported to me it's been a meaningful experience for them. Again, what my objective is in all of this is to simply share with people the realities of a very rapid and dramatically changing world, and that it offers tremendous opportunities for them, and that each of us has the capacity to grow, to respond to these opportunities. And it's a lot of fun, and people seem to be enjoying the process.
Ed, I think you're the kind of person who sees a partly sunny day instead of a partly cloudy one, who sees a glass half full instead of half empty. As a motivator in Futuring, you must be optimistic, upbeat, and encouraging. Would you agree? Would you confess to being a hardcore
I would
actor?
confess to that, but I must admit I have my moments, and I've got to, you know, gather all the resources within me occasionally to stay very positive.
As a balance.
But as a balance, you know, there's a bit of realism that I think has to be in one's life. I'm not Pollyannish in any way, shape, or form, but I am very excited about the future and the opportunities, and that is a driving force within me.
Ed, the year 2000 is only 11 years away, not really that far from where we are now. We'll be entering a new century, though, and in my mind, that just conjures up all kinds of visions of the future. Tell me what your vision is of the future.
If I can relate to or refer to an individual that I think was a much greater thinker than I am or will ever be, a gentleman by the name of Teilhard de Chardin was a Jesuit theologian who had some visions and did some visioning in the 1950s. And he basically said that by virtue of communication, transportation, and technology, we would go through a period of time just like we're going through right now, where there would be very rapid and dramatic changes taking place. People that never knew the other existed would come together. Languages and cultures that were in opposition, such as the United States and the Soviet Union, would begin to make efforts to try to come together, find ways of cooperating or networking. In a sense, oil would meet water with a dynamic of trying to mix, trying to develop new models and new frameworks. And he said that this would happen. I think it's exactly what we're going through right now. And he anticipated that this would continue into the 21st century, and I would agree with that. I think the next 12 years are going to provide us some challenges. There are opportunities within those challenges, but some real challenges. He also indicated that into the 21st century, all of this confusion, all of this antitheticalness that seems to be out there would come together in a new consciousness, a global consciousness he called an omega point, where even though it may be different or even though it may be antithetical, we will find a way to allow one's individual vision and perspective of life to exist with ours, and we will develop areas of commonality and common thinking where we will share things that we've never shared before.
A connectedness.
A connectedness, exactly. And I would have to say that I agree with that vision of the future. And I think those of us who are living and working today will be the process agent, so to speak, of creating that new world, creating that omega point that he spoke to. A biblical reference that I use is the example of Moses, and that Moses led his people through the desert and a lot of trouble and turmoil for many years until he reached the promised land. He never entered the promised land because he and God had a little disagreement, so he never entered that promised land. But he led his people to that point. And I think those of us that are living today at this time, who are involving ourselves with futuring processes, etc., are the Moseses. We are the ones that are preparing the way, and it will be our courage and our willingness to go beyond where we've been that will set the kind of world that will exist for our children and their children. And it's a real challenge. It's a real opportunity. And I believe that we will do it. And we will create that world of the 21st century that will be exciting and peaceful and full of opportunities for everyone.
So, according to Ed Barlow, our future includes a global economy, ever-changing technology, a population where women will make up 65% of the workforce, a racial mixture changing the color of our society, a graying population, and much more. The wheels are in motion. The trends are gathering shape, form, and speed, and as futurists, we'll be on the lookout today for those events and ideas that may be a significant part of our tomorrow. Keep your ear to the ground and your eyes wide open. See you next time on Horizons.